All right, good morning. How's everyone doing? We're still barely morning here. My name is Greg Sindelar. I have the privilege of being the CEO here at Texas Public Policy Foundation. And, the number one thing I've learned about leadership and being a CEO is to always hire people who are much smarter than you. Now, I'm an Aggie, so it's a low bar, but we have just some of the most amazing people here, and you'll get to meet one of them later today with Mandy. Drogin leads our conversation with Corey DeAngelis, who'll be up here in just a second. And of course, one of my baseball heroes, Mark Teixeira, who's here, which, Mark, I have to tell you, it's a little intimidating that you're right there staring at me, but I did give a speech once with Roger Clemens doing the same thing, and that was even more intimidating. All right, so there's been a lot of talk across the state about what the results of Tuesday meant and what November will mean for Texas. And it's frequently said that elections have consequences. And I think if there's a resounding message that what happened in March in the primary and then May in the runoffs of this year, it's that parents want to be empowered and they're demanding far more options than what we are giving them currently in the state. And the even better news to that is that we know that parent empowerment, whoa, that's loud. All right, there we go. All right. The even better news is we know that school choice and parent empowerment works. It's not theoretical. We've seen it in many, many other states. In fact, Texas is lagging way behind when it comes to empowering our parents. School choice saw Florida's low-income public school kids jump from 33rd in the nation to first over the course of their almost 2 decades of school choice programs. And we've seen similar gains in other states as they've continued to empower parents more and more. And in times when it seems that no one can agree on anything, we've seen this in the political world a lot, I think school choice is one of the few things that actually most Texans agree on. Poll after poll shows that the majority of Texans want school choice. This support transcends party, racial, and economic lines. And so hopefully that makes you optimistic about where we are as a state and where we're heading as a state. And my optimism starts with the parents of Texas who have been making their voices heard the last couple of years. And I'm optimistic because we have so many wonderful legislators and potentially future legislators here today who are going to be heroes to each and every one of these parents and kids. Heroes to Republicans, heroes to independents, and even heroes to Democrats. Because as I said before, this is what Texas wants and this is what Texas is demanding. So to the current and future heroes of Texas, it's time for y'all to be recognized. So as I call your name, would love for you to stand. And I'm going to just admit to y'all, it's a little bit of a long list. So hopefully I get through everybody. So if I go a little quickly, please forgive me. But I'm going to start with our state reps that are here today. We have Representative Tony Tinderholt is here. Representative Jared Patterson is here. Representative Steve Toth is here. Representative Giovanni Capriglione is here. And Representative Brian Harrison are here. Well, I don't know where y'all are, but please help me welcome. There's Brian. And then we also have some nominees to potentially be leaders in the State House. And so this is an even longer list, as there's a lot of y'all potentially coming in. Potentially Representatives Joanne Schaffner, Andy Hopper, Wes Verdell, Steve Kennard, Shelley Luther, Alan Schoolcraft, which is the perfect name for parent empowerment, Alan. Hillary Hicklin, Caroline Fairley, Mark LaHood, Janice Holt, Helen Kerwin, who is the mother of my boss and friend, Brooke Rollins, is here as well. Mitch Little, Brent Money, Mike Alcott, Matt Morgan, Don McLaughlin, and AJ Lauterbach are all here. So thank y'all. We were upstairs earlier with Chairman Brad Buckley, who's chair of public education, as well as the governor's team, talking about parent empowerment school choice, and it is clear that there's a mandate, and as Chairman Buckley said, this is the help that's on the way for parents. So thank y'all for being here. But y'all, this is more than just policy, and it's more than just politics. Parent empowerment and school choice is the right thing to do. To empower parents and to make educational decisions for their kids, next session, we have the chance to finally secure Texas for our next generation. By educating them well, we can ensure that they are well equipped to take up and carry the torch of prosperity and freedom that we are passing on. And together, we can make changes that will outlast ourselves, changes that our kids, grandkids, and even great-grandkids will benefit from. That's the mindset we have to have, and that's the legacy that we will leave. So yes, I am optimistic about the future of Texas, and I'm optimistic about the future of our country. And surely events, disagreements, and concerns can cast a long shadow, but that shadow will not overcome the brightness of our commitment to our children. And so we owe it to our kids and their kids and their kids' kids to unleash the potential of every child in this state. And in doing so, we will know that we will secure the future, not just of Texas, but of America, because as goes Texas, so goes the nation. So I could talk about this all day, but I'm actually just here to be the warm-up act for our wonderful keynote before the panel. And there's no one that's more powerful at talking about parental empowerment and school choice and understanding this revolution that is happening across the country than Dr. Corey DeAngelis. And so I'm so pleased to have Corey here today to talk about his book, The Parent Revolution. If you haven't read it, please do. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. And discuss the issue on panel here shortly. As I ask Corey to come to the stage, I'll let you know a little bit about his background. He is a senior fellow for the American Federation of Children and a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institute. And he has a PhD in education from the University of Arkansas, but he is a Texan who is educated in Texas and lives in Texas, where him and his wife are expecting their first child. Please help me welcome the wonderful Corey DeAngelis.
How's everybody doing? How does it feel to win? How did you feel 2 nights ago? Look, there were 21 so-called Republicans who voted against their own party platform issue of school choice. And guess what? 14 of them are gone. 14 are gone. It's the hardest thing to do in politics. 95% of incumbents usually win all the time. We reversed that trend in Texas because primary voters made it a political issue for them, made it a priority for them, and now we're going to have the votes for school choice in Texas for the first time in Texas history. It's absolutely fantastic. Got to give a huge shout out to Governor Greg Abbott for being a staunch education freedom fighter on the issue, unapologetic freedom fighter, and now we picked up 14 votes on the issue of school choice, cementing a school choice majority in Texas for the first time in history. Greg, I got to thank you for that kind introduction. I do got to tell you, you called me doctor. I'm not a real doctor, though. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor. I got a PhD in education policy, so I can't really help you with the hard things, but I can help you with the math problem, maybe. Anybody get your signed book already? Yeah, thanks for doing it. I'll be signing books afterwards as well. I got to tell you, it's a national bestseller. It was endorsed by Trump recently. Maybe it's correlation and causation. I don't know which one it is. Thank you for that. But also, you can take Ted Cruz's advice on the back, senator from Texas. He says you can, quote, ruin Randy Weingarten's day by reading this book. She was the school closer. She fought to keep the schools closed, lobbied the CDC to do so, fear-mongering every step of the way. In fact, they have overplayed their hand so much that in the front, you'll see that I dedicated the book to Randy Weingarten and the teachers' unions for overplaying their hand and inadvertently doing more to advance school choice and homeschooling than anyone could have ever imagined. America is beyond grateful. Thank you. But a couple of years ago, I woke up. Yes, I wake up sometimes. I woke up today. I made it to this event. I'm actually proud of myself that I made it over here. But I woke up to what I thought was a Babylon Bee headline. Anybody see Babylon Bee? It's satire. It's not actually. Sometimes you can't tell these days whether it's satire or the truth. But I woke up to what I thought was a Babylon Bee headline. It wasn't. What I thought was a nightmare. It wasn't. It was actually a tweet by Randy Weingarten herself saying that she was in Ukraine at the front lines to assess the situation. What in the heck was the teachers union boss from America doing in Ukraine right after the nation's report card scores came out showing decades of learning loss caused by their union-induced school closures? What was she going to do? Make the war go remote like she did with our schools? That might actually have helped. Maybe she should try it. But look, they were trying to escape all forms of accountability. They were fear-mongering every step of the way. In D.C., they had fake body bags outside the public school offices. They had fake tombstones. They were writing letters to their governors saying that with fake obituaries, fake epitaphs. It was nonstop fear-mongering. It made no sense. In places like in California, commie California, I'm glad we're not there. I live in Texas, grew up in Texas. Actually, there was a representative here that said that I did not grow up in Texas. And there was a community note slapped to her tweet recently, a representative from Austin. Thank goodness for Elon Musk for taking over Twitter, now X. But there was a private school, a Christian school in Sacramento County. During the COVID era, there was a lot of lunacy. We all remember all this stuff, right? It was hypocrisy nonstop. It was just things that made zero sense. But they had a stupid health order in Sacramento County that arbitrarily applied to schools, but not daycare centers. Because COVID was smart. It knew if you were learning something, it was going to get you. But if you were there in the same building, it would turn off. It's like, okay, I'm gonna halt right now because I know you're not learning anything. It was kind of like, it was smart, but it was also a courteous virus. On planes, if you were eating and you had your mask down when you were eating, take your time, I'm gonna let you go, and then I'll come after you once you put your mask up and you finish it. It was all total nonsense. You had people vacationing in Puerto Rico and Chicago while railing against going back to work. If it was safe enough to go vacation thousands of miles away, why wasn't it safe enough to go back to work in person? Well, it's more enjoyable to go on vacation than it is to go back to work. So if you got a signed copy, great. If you haven't, I'll be signing them afterwards as well. But this is the parent revolution. I do have to apologize really quickly for the horrible handwriting. I sent a book to Randy Weingarten, actually, and I posted it on Twitter, now X, and people made fun of me because of my horrible handwriting, but you can't blame me. I went to government schools. I'm sorry. But I'll be signing afterwards as well. But this is a school choice revolution that's sweeping the nation right now. And even if you don't have kids right now, if you're not a parent or even a grandparent, this is a battle for you because the radical left has infiltrated the government schools for far too long. They don't even have to have their own kids anymore. They can shape the future direction of this country by educating your kids, indoctrinating other people's kids for 13 years of their lives, for 7 hours a day. Let's say you don't even care about education policy. Let's say you want to lower taxes. Well, going through government schools for that long, facing that indoctrination, learning that big government's the solution to all of your problems, those kids are going to turn out to raise your taxes later on in life. Don't let them. Take the W, take the win. We're going to have the votes for school choice in Texas. And guess what? Texas has about 5.5 million kids in the school system. That's over 10% of all children in America having access to universal school choice. Milton Friedman's vision finally coming to fruition right before our very eyes. And yes, it has become a GOP litmus test issue, but some Democrats are starting to defect on the issue too. Think about Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He changed his education platform right before the election, probably because he was looking over to Virginia. Anybody watch that election in 2021? Mr. Terry, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. McAuliffe, the Democrat, former governor of Virginia, lost to a Republican on the issue of education by 6 points with education voters, and that was the number 2 issue in that election. That never happens. Democrats have had a decades-long double-digit advantage on the issue of education, but no more. Glenn Youngkin laid out a blueprint for political success for Republicans, but more importantly, it's the right thing to do. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. You can make left and right-leaning arguments for school choice. The problem is, if you look at Randy Weingarten's union, 99.97% of their campaign contributions in 2022, you guessed it, they went to Democrats. It's a money laundering scheme. It ought to be illegal, and that's why the elected officials from the Democrat Party fight against their own constituents to block them from having more educational opportunities, and they side with special interests who control them. That's a huge problem, but the political winds are shifting on our side. You had a high-profile Democrat, even in Pennsylvania, with Shapiro, at least signaling public support for private school choice. That's a huge shift in the right direction. And as Milton Friedman once famously said, he said a lot of great things, obviously, but one of his best quotes was, "The way that you change things is not about getting the right people into office. Obviously, all the people in this room are absolutely going to help, and we're going to advance education freedom that way. But the way that you truly change things, Milton Friedman said, is by getting a climate of public opinion where it becomes politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. And we finally reached escape velocity on the issue of school choice. You have sitting legislators in North Carolina and Georgia flipping to the GOP on education freedom. Misha Maynor in Georgia, Tricia Cotham in North Carolina. And now we have 11 states with universal school choice like we've never seen before. In the past 3 years, we've had more wins on education freedom than the past 3 decades. It has been an insane amount of momentum. I just want to give a shout out. Anybody see my Twitter battles? Anybody follow me on X? Hey, Bob Bowden, good to see you. But it's gotten pretty nasty. And in some cases, they've been sharing photos of my mom. Yes, they've gotten so low that they've really stooped to the argument of your mom, you know you're losing if that's your argument. The other one they've tried is you're racist if you want to reopen schools. Yes, they did that in Chicago. They said the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. They threw every leftist buzzword at the wall to see what would stick, but now they're going after my mom. Why? Because she works at a public school. That's an argument that helps my case. And guess what? She supports me too. She's here. Thank you, Mom, Cheryl, for being here at the event. And one more thing, there's been a lot of victories over the past couple of years. The biggest victory has been, well, I got married. Thank you, Miranda, for being here. And also, we're expecting August 4th, Angelina will be joining the parent revolution with us. We're joining the parent revolution on the front lines with all of you once and for all as foot soldiers, not just generals. So it's a great victory. We've had so much momentum. 11 states going universal. Anybody watching Louisiana? Louisiana's House just passed easily, supermajority support. Even some Democrats voted for it. 20% of their House Democrats voted for full-throated universal school choice. No more picking winners and losers. No more of this incremental reform. We've gone from 0 to 100 real quick. And if anybody in Texas wants to tell you that rural voters don't support school choice, well, I hope they learned something this year. In March on Super Tuesday and 2 nights ago, rural voters do support school choice in large numbers. 69% of the incumbents we opposed for voting against their own party platform lost their races. Now it's happening. How much time do I have? Mandy says, wrap it up, and I'm happy to join Mandy and Mark Teixeira on the stage as well for a panel. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'll be signing books afterwards. Did I stay? We're playing musical chairs now. I didn't go to private school. I couldn't figure this stuff out a long time.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I still kind of have chills because this is a monumentous occasion between the current legislators that drove in from their districts and the incoming legislators, the Republican nominees that fought on the issue to empower parents. Thank you all for coming in, and thank you to the moms and dads and grandparents that are sitting here. It's a special day to celebrate, even though we still need to run through that tape come the legislative session. And it's a really special day to have Corey here to talk about the parent revolution that he's been a part of here in Texas, but also across the country. And also to have Mark Teixeira. Something that's really amazing about the parent empowerment movement is it's brought out legislators, parents, grandparents from all across our great state. It's also brought out individuals that have celebrity and status. It's really important, I'm gonna read off his very amazing athletic achievements. Mark, he's a former Major League Baseball player of 14 years. He played for the Los Angeles Angels, the New York Yankees, where he was a world champion in 2009 and was the runner-up for MVP. Amazing, right? As well as our very own Texas Rangers.
Damn.
It is. It's amazing. It is absolutely incredible. As a sports fan, I'm in awe being here with him. But what's more amazing to me, and what I think is really important to think about the leaders in this movement, the legislators that are here fighting for you, Governor Abbott that's fighting, is at the heart of it, Mark's just a dad. And back when we were preparing for the 4th special session, someone reached out to me and said, Mark wants to help. Tex wants to help. He has a platform. He's got over 300,000 followers on Twitter, which, Corey, you're pretty famous.
Dang it. Okay.
He beats you. Right. And he's got a platform across Texas and across America. And he just, out of nowhere, said, how can I help? How can I serve? What can I do to educate and serve the moms and dads so that children of Texas, the next generation of Texas, will have the opportunities that my own children have? So to me, that is the most amazing part about Mark here, and we're blessed to have you. Let's start with just asking you, why did you reach out, and how did you come to the conclusion that you wanted to use your platform to advocate for kids?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel. And for me, it's really about serving. And you get to a point of your life, whether you're young or old, and God calls you to do something more important than hitting a baseball. And I loved hitting baseball. Don't get me wrong. I have 3 teenagers. I can make my own schedule. I have the time, and I try to find something that I could make a difference in, that I have some experience in, and working with charter schools in New York City when I played for the Yankees, and navigating the schools in the Northeast, and making the decision to move back to Texas. These are all reasons that parents should be empowered. I'm blessed that I have the opportunities to send my kids to private schools, and not every parent has that opportunity. Not every parent can choose which school their kid gets to go to. And so I took that blessing that I have in my life and just said, hey, how can I help your movement? How can I help Governor Abbott? And in my short time here in Austin, I've been back in Texas for 3 years now, just love getting to meet so many people that are passionate about this and are really making a difference in this movement.
Well, thank you for being here. And that's what it takes, is every single person here, every single parent across Texas locking arms, standing together across every socioeconomic status, across every political affiliation. That's really what we are. So thank you for being here. Oh, people must not be able to hear you.
He gets 2 mics.
Does he have to say it again?
Multiple mics.
Bam.
So Corey, you've been traversing the country talking about the parent revolution. You noted how many states that have started to grow and expand their private school choice programs, and we're at 11 now with what is referred to as universal school choice, which is grounded in the belief that America is based on freedom, right? So what have you seen across the country and that you're also seeing here with parents in Texas?
And by the way, we got to give credit to Mandy Drogin, who's been crossing the state with the governor, getting people riled up for education freedom. But yeah, look, this is going to be the biggest victory ever in Texas. This is the crown jewel of the school choice movement. It's going to be fantastic. But look, in other states like in Florida, Greg mentioned this earlier, the public schools have gotten better. It doesn't destroy them, actually, is a rising tide that lifts all boats. And nationwide, we have 29 studies on this subject. 26 of them positive. More school choice, better outcomes in the public schools. When you can take the money with you and you can vote with your feet, they won't label you as a domestic terrorist anymore. Everybody remember that? The National School Board sent a letter to Biden invoking, under the Patriot Act of all things, that parents protesting at school board meetings should be labeled for domestic terrorism. The FBI even created a threat tag to try to bully and silence parents into submission. I'm thankful that their plan backfired. Parents were just emboldened to fight even harder. And now 26 states, including Texas, have pulled their funding from the NSBA. We should call them the RSBA.
Thank you.
We should call them the Regional School Boards Association at this time, the RSBA. But look, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. They overplayed their hand, and parents, look, we're winning so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning, guys. Just kidding, we're not done yet. We got to get Texas, and when Texas comes, the rest of the monopoly dominoes will start to fall all across the country. The red states are already engaging in friendly competition, picking up the football, not the baseball, but the football, to become the parents' party, and they're trying to outmaneuver themselves to compete with one another, and that's how laboratories of democracy are supposed to work. The blue states aren't doing it yet, but maybe they'll come along at some point. As in the book, I lay out, I coin a phrase I call bipartisanship through hyperpartisanship. It's going to take one of the parties, the Republicans, picking up the football, racking up some wins on the issue, and then the Democrats will say, hey, politicians respond more to logic and power. No, they don't respond to logic. They respond more to power and politics than logic and morality. And so when voters take that energy to the ballot box, you'll see some Democrat defectors too. But that was a long-winded answer to some things you did ask and some things you didn't. But thank you, Mandy.
That's great. Mark, I heard you talk about empowering parents and your work when you were with the Yankees with charter schools to try and give another option to those children that are zoned based on their zip code for failing schools in the inner cities. Can you talk a little bit about your experience there and how that's led to you wanting to empower parents in Texas?
Yeah, and going back a little bit even to my days before the Yankees, the first few organizations that I supported were all education based. My mom was a public school teacher. My wife, both of her parents were public school teachers in rural Georgia. So I have so much respect for public school teachers and everything that they do, the hard job that they do have. So opportunity has always been huge for my wife and I. And so when we look at philanthropic organizations, after school, charter schools, we were kind of all in already. I got to New York and it was really like the epicenter of the charter school movement. And you had kids in East Harlem and the South Bronx that were going to the worst of the worst schools. You throw out a lot of different numbers of, 50% of Texas kids not reading at appropriate grade level. This was like 90%, 95%, right? So the worst of the worst schools in the poorest of the neighborhoods. Charter schools came in and they started making a difference. And when you started incrementally seeing kids succeeding that were told, you're not going to succeed just because of where you were born. I mean, how sad is that, right? And I got involved with this charter school movement in 2010, and I started seeing people around it, parents buying in. And the charter school movement turned into the school choice movement, and just you saw this momentum, even in a place that's as tough as New York. So I got to Texas a couple years ago, and I'm like, we've got to be a school choice state, right? Like, no, we don't have school choice yet. You've got to be kidding me, right? So it was really a wake-up call for me that what I thought was happening all over the country, still getting pushback. To a lot of Corey's points, is there was so much pushback, but I've seen it firsthand. For a decade, I was on the board of Dream Charter School. We had 3 different schools in East Harlem and the South Bronx, and we were making a difference. Even going to DC and lobbying on the behalf of after-school programs to continue funding, because when Democrats want to pay for all of their pet projects, a lot of times programs that are actually working are going to get cut. And we've seen it work in East Harlem, we've seen it work in South Bronx, and hopefully we'll see the school choice movement working in Texas.
And they're total hypocrites on the issue. Beto O'Rourke went to private school himself and then campaigned against Abbott on the issue, saying that other families shouldn't be able to have opportunities. Joe Biden went to private school, sent his kids to private school, opposed the school choice for others. Gene Wu from Houston, I don't know if you saw his Twitter, he stepped on a rake the other day, major red flags there. I mean, you go see what he said yourself, but he sends his kid to private school and brags about it and says, my kids are so smart. They had to test in. How are low-income families going to be able to test in? Low-income families have kids that are smart too, Gene. But look, total hypocrisy on their part. And look, the Democrats have controlled the Texas House for far too long, and we've said enough. It's not happening anymore, especially after this year's primary season. And guess what? If you don't want Texas to go blue, school choice is one way to reverse that trend. How? Look in West Virginia. That's a rural state, even more rural than Texas, according to the Census Bureau. They were the first state to go universal on school choice. Since they've expanded education freedom, they now have supermajorities in both chambers. Florida, you thought that was a purple state, right? Florida was a swing state for a while. DeSantis barely won in 2018 by a fraction of a point. The next day in the Wall Street Journal, anybody remember the headline? It was "School Choice Moms Tipped the Governor's Race for DeSantis." Black moms in particular, according to CNN exit polling the next day, found that they showed up in force for DeSantis. Voters who might have disagreed with DeSantis on a lot of other issues, they made that a priority because his opponent, Andrew Gillum, the Democrat, called to get rid of over 100,000 scholarships that were disproportionately benefiting non-white and low-income families. So fast forward to 2022, DeSantis wins by a whopping 20 points, and they now have supermajorities in both chambers. Look, it's the right thing to do, but it's also a political winner too.
He gets me fired up. Right? I mean, so you reminded me that my wake-up call to the partisanship of this issue was, it was 2015, 2016. I went to D.C. with some charter school advocates in New York, and so took the train down, and we had an entire day that we were going to be able to have a forum with representatives. So we did a panel like this in front of a bipartisan group, but then we were invited by certain New York congressmen and congresswomen into their chambers to talk about the issue and why we should support blah blah. So I went into one congressman's office, a Democratic congressman. Before I could even ask him to support this bill, he said, "Now tell me who's sponsoring that?" Well, it was sponsored by a Republican.
Oh, can't do that.
He went on a 5-minute tirade against that person. He did not care what this was about. It was this particular bill was about funding after-school programs, because if you look at a lot of our inner city kids, they need a place to go after school, and so it's not at 3 o'clock push them out the door and hopefully they come back the next day. We need them there until 7 because their parents are working and what have you. And it was just sad to me that the first question was, who's this going to help? Tell me exactly how these kids are benefiting. It was, who sponsored the bill? And he wasn't going to support it.
They're going to benefit because it's their parents, and they're not your kids, they're the parents' kids, and they know more about their children's education needs than anybody else, particularly more than bureaucrats sitting in offices hundreds of miles away. So it's funny how the other side will say, well, we can't give low-income families a choice. They're not going to choose the right schools. It's total elitist hypocrisy. It's paternalism. It's disgusting. It's the worst argument I've ever heard against school choice. And guess what? The status quo doesn't benefit teachers that are doing a good job either. This isn't public versus private. This isn't teachers versus students. This is about freedom. And look, when school choice is enacted, the public schools up their game in response to competition. They also put more money into the classroom and don't hire as many worthless administrators. Look, between 2000 and now, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, the number of students and teachers in the system increased by about the same amount, by about 7%. Not too bad. But the number of administrators in the system increased by 90%, nearly 90%. It has become more of a jobs program for useless administrators than an education initiative for kids. And teachers who are doing a good job, they're not seeing the money. Since 1970, we've increased per student funding in the state of Texas by about 160% in real terms. Teacher salaries, about 10%. In real terms. The money's not making its way into the classroom because they have a monopoly. That is the only way to fix it, is from bottom-up accountability with families being empowered to choose.
Thank you, guys. So my favorite, sometimes the most difficult part of my job in talking to parents, the ability to travel around the state and talk to moms and dads and grandparents that are responsible for their children. And that's why I constantly say the love for your child, that love that we all had, that lightning strike when you first hold your first child, it's a love that you can never understand until you have it. And I'm excited that it's coming soon for you. But that transcends race and socioeconomics, and I've been blessed to talk to parents across the state, and I hear some amazing stories of innovative school leaders and parents that have found a way, and I also hear really horrifying stories of parents that I walk away with tears on my shoulders. I would love to hear maybe a story or two from a parent's perspective or from a child's perspective for the kids that you were serving in inner city Harlem and Corey, the cities that you have gone across. I know you've heard from parents. Let's put some real faces on why this is so important.
So one of the great things that I loved about our charter school network in New York was that we had a contract with every single kid. And I don't need to tell you how that works. There's a lottery, a kid gets selected to be able to go to one of these schools. And these parents do feel like they won the lottery. And it may not be a check in the mail, but it's my kid now has a chance to go to a better school. But as part of that, the parent signs a contract. And this is what we're going to do for your kid, but this is what you're going to do for your kid. And that is the amount of parents that have talked, whether it's at graduation, whether it's at our fundraisers, and say, empowering me, making me a part of my kid's schooling has been the best thing for my family. And so it's not, when these kids are getting better educations, their parents are growing around them. And so this is not just, a third grader or a high school kid getting a better education. This is really going to be changing families' lives. And I can still remember hearing these parents, and again, with tears in their eyes, talking about how great this has been for their families. And when families grow, communities grow, and communities grow, cities grow. And in a state like Texas, this has a multiplying opportunity that can be great for the entire state.
Absolutely.
Yeah, look, we're talking a lot about New York City, right? And they spend about $40,000 per kid in their government school failure factory indoctrination centers. But look, there's actually, Vodi Bakum had a good quote, because a lot of the benefits of school choice aren't even captured by standardized test scores. It's people want a safer environment. They want to send their kids to schools that align with their values. They don't want to be indoctrinated with the LGBTs when the schools aren't focusing on the ABCs. They want them to focus on the basics, on education, not indoctrination. But Vodi Bakum said it best: we cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is parents aren't surprised anymore, and they're fighting back. They've started a parent revolution. Get one right now. It's on Amazon for 25% off. But no, in New York City, they also had a study using the lottery system. You can make apples to apples comparison like a medical trial. Randomly, some kids get to go to the charter school. Randomly, some of them lose the lottery and have to go to the government-run school. And they found in a top economics journal, Dobby and Fryer, in a study in 2015, found that winning the lottery had a complete elimination of the likelihood of crime for male students through the study period. If you won the lottery, you weren't incarcerated. If you lost the lottery, about 5% of them through the study period were already incarcerated. It's a 100% reduction in crime. For female students, females don't commit as many crimes as males, so they looked at things like whether they reported a teenage pregnancy. They found a 59% reduction in the likelihood of teenage pregnancies for female students. So that's huge. Those are things that'll never be captured by a standardized test. And this is why we don't want to regulate the programs. We want to give families as much flexibility to choose, because school quality is multidimensional. Testing and academics, that's part of it, but also you wanting to raise your kid not to hate their country. There are a lot of public schools that have good ratings from the state. Your kids are getting all A's on their report card, but if they're teaching you to hate your parents and to hate your country and to not like your fellow students based on immutable characteristics, that is a Marxist, divisive ideology. It needs to be rooted out. We need to strike at the root. And you see all these campus protests at the higher ed level. It doesn't start out of nowhere. It starts at the K through 12 level. And so we got to fight back for our own kids. We also have to fight back for the future of our country too. But real quick story. I know I'm going too long. But real quick story that you asked about. Anybody know Walter Blanks from the American Federation for Children? He was one of my colleagues. And he tells his story very often of he used a voucher in Ohio. They had a program for a long time to go to a private school. His mom told him at one point after he came home getting into a fight at school that if the school administrator told her that if you just give us 5 more years, we'll turn things around. We promise this time. It's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. But Walter's mom responded by saying, in 5 years, Walter will either end up in jail or in a body bag. I don't have 5 years. I need the money now. We can't wait for politicians to fulfill their empty promises anymore. So this is for everybody. This is for low income, high income. This is crosses ideological and racial lines. And this is why we're going to win, finally, in Texas.
When we're talking about the partisanship, it's interesting that you brought up how DeSantis' win, the percentage was tipped by the African-American mothers whose kids were utilizing private school choice. And something interesting here that occurred in Texas about a year ago, the governor went and did an event in inner city Houston at a historically Black church. And I can vividly remember watching as a lot of the parishioners came in to hear, and why is the governor here, and things like that, and skeptical, body language skeptical, looks skeptical and whatnot. And by the end of explaining how empowering parents can serve their families and how it has served millions of families across the country, just like theirs, that have struggled, just like Walter's, they rushed the stage. They rushed the stage to talk to the governor, to hear more. How do we do this? And it's really important when we're talking about that value alignment. And I think that was one of the things that resonated. We were sitting in a church, families that said, I need my child to read. They have to read. By the way, when we talk about this in Texas and to the legislators, we've talked about this back in 2019, we had to pass a law to mandate the teaching of phonics. HB 3 mandated the teaching of phonics. Y'all, we have 50 years worth of data that says phonics is far superior. These parents, these oftentimes poor parents, they get it. They know it. They want this. But they also need that value alignment. They don't want their children sent into schools where they're learning, instead of standing up and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, they're either standing up or learning about the LGBTQ flag or their pronouns or things like that. So
really a boy or
I would, right. And so that's really what a lot of what I hear when I'm out, and what I hear when you're in the inner cities and you're talking to these families about how the far left has kind of co-opted a lot of our instructional materials and the programs and whatnot. But I want to hear from you, Mark, about the values and why the values that you selected, the school that you selected for your children, and how you know that empowering parents across socioeconomics, across race, across zip codes, how that will truly course correct an entire system and, quite frankly, an entire generation that has been run off the rails.
Well, the values are the foundation, and we can talk about building houses or pillars of school choice or parent empowerment or whatever it might be. But without the foundation of those values, it does all crumble. And I grew up in a Christian conservative household. My dad went to the United States Naval Academy. He served his country. My mom was a teacher. I married a girl from Northeast Georgia who had 2 teachers, worked their tails off to pay for her and her brother to go to college. So the values that I personally have, I just wanted to make sure that my kids understood that those values have merit. And those values, there is a joy that I have in my faith in the Lord. There is a joy that I have in succeeding. Sports is the ultimate meritocracy. It is. When I was playing well, man, I got rewarded, and fans cheered for me, and I got contracts, and everyone loved me, and I'm signing autographs, just like Corey's signing his book.
Can they read yours though? They can't read mine.
When I failed, it hurt. And I feel like our society, it's like, we don't want kids to struggle. We don't want kids to have to work hard. We don't want kids to have to be told, you know what, Junior, that's not right. This is what's right. And Jerry Seinfeld, I'm not sure if you saw his speech, and it was a kind of a comedy routine, but it was a commencement speech at Duke. And he goes, we're proud of things we should be ashamed of, and ashamed of things we should be proud of. We should be proud of our military. We should be proud of success. We should be proud of great test scores. We should be proud of sending kids to college. Mm-hmm. And we should be ashamed of all those things don't happen. So for me, moving back to Texas, this is my third stint here. I lived in College Station as a kid, lived in Dallas for 8 years when I signed, played with the Rangers, and now I'm back here in Austin. I can live, my family and I can live wherever we want in the entire United States. I don't have a full-time job. If anyone's hiring, I'll give you my card.
Come work at TPPF.
I can live wherever I want. We chose Austin, Texas for a lot of different reasons. And one of them was we wanted to be able to go to church with our head held high. We wanted to be able to send our kids to a school. All of my kids go to Region School of Austin. And we want to send, and it's not perfect, and nobody in here is perfect. I'm surely not a perfect parent. But when those kids come home from school and they walk into our house, they understand the values that are expected out of them. Because at school, it's the same values are taught. And it all just comes back to parent empowerment and school choice, is that if you want to opt out of the craziness, parents should be able to opt out of it. And that is, in a nutshell, hopefully next legislative session, we're going to give the parents choices to opt out of the craziness.
It's happening.
Absolutely. Very great. Yeah. Thank you. Corey, tell us, we've heard.
I didn't finish my joke earlier.
You
So I
have
had
a dad
joke in my
joke.
opening. I had an opening, and I was talking about the stupid health order from the COVID mandates. Remember that in California? And I just remember I didn't close the loop on that one. There was a private school, a Christian school, that rebranded itself as a daycare center. They retrained all of their employees as daycare workers so they could open, whereas their government school unions were fighting to remain closed so they could hold children's education hostage. But
You really
I
embrace
closed the loop. I'm done. I'm done with that one.
This dad joke thing. Like you're already there before the baby even comes.
I'm practicing.
But thank you. Okay. You shared a great story about Walter. Walter Blanks, the African-American young man who mother said, he's going to be dead or in jail. And we hear that a lot. Tell another story. Tell another story about a parent. For those that are watching online, for those that are here in the room, we say the parent empowerment movement has locked arms with parents across every spectrum, but also public school, private school, homeschool, whatever it is, parents that recognize they should be decision makers. I want to hear another story of a parent that has really impacted your work and fueled your desire to see this in Texas and across the country.
Yeah, I mean, we have a ton of, at the American Federation for Children, you go to our website, it's called Voices for Choice. And they go and testify across the country and tell their stories. So we have a ton. Ashley Elliott is one I would point out and share with people as well to go check out. But I have my own story too. Hey, maybe I'll tell my own story. It's in the book as well. So if you want to get another copy, it's 25% off on Amazon. You already have a copy if you're here. If you're online, make sure you get one and send one to Randy Weingarten. The Chicago Teachers Union boss sent her copy back to me. I guess it was above her reading level. Hey, if the kids' scores are any indication, they did an interpretive dance video as well to protest reopening schools. I mean, you thought their math scores were wrong. I feel bad for the dance students. They couldn't figure that out either. But no, I went to government schools my entire K through 12 in Texas, in San Antonio. But I did have the opportunity to go to a magnet school in high school. It was a communications school, so maybe that worked out for me a little bit, maybe sometimes. When I make mistakes, I'll blame the government school system every time. But no, in middle school, in the school that I was assigned to, it was cool to get into fights. There was drugs running rampant on the campuses. We played this game called 10 Seconds. Anybody remember that growing up in Texas schools? Now, you all went to private schools anyway. But no, you'd fight for 10 seconds. In the bathrooms, you get rolled into gangs, and it was the cool thing to do. I survived, and Mom, thank you for raising me in the right way and keeping me away from that stuff. But in high school, I did go to a magnet school. It's still district run, but it was, at least you're not assigned to it. They don't have as much monopoly power. They have to attract their customers. They can have admission standards and processes. And so that was a good opportunity for me. I think other families should have educational opportunities too. And look, a lot of kids fall through the cracks. They don't escape and get out of the gangs and the drugs, and they fall into that stuff. So that's a huge problem. And it shouldn't be limited to schools that are run by the government. Look, I mean, some people say, Texas already has school choice. That's like saying you can choose any soda you want as long as it's a Coke. You can choose any juice you want as long as it's orange. No, that's not real choice. That's like saying you can go to any grocery store you want as long as it's Walmart. No, you should be able to choose to take your kid's education dollars. It's meant for your kid. It's your tax money. Should follow them to a private school if you want. Or hey, if you like the public school, you can keep the public school. For real this time, unlike with your doctor. Sorry, Obama. But look, the public schools do get better. You should be able to take that money to a private or even a homeschool setting too.
Yeah, great. So one of the things that we talk about is how empowering parents. It obviously will serve those parents whose children need an exit strategy, whether it's that they are in a low-performing school, the crisis of low expectations, the soft bigotry of low expectations, the radical indoctrination that we're really seeing come out, particularly on our college campuses, but also in our high schools and in our lower grades. You know, something, when we talk about stories, something I found really, really interesting that I discovered back when Osama bin Laden's love letter to America. For anybody on social media, there was a young lady that this went viral last year, universal viral love letter, and it was she was a University of Texas student actually. So I thought, who is this Lynette Atkins? Who is she and where did she go to school? This was a young person that had been at a high school in San Antonio in our public school system. We keep seeing that these children that are coming out of the public schools have somehow been taught to hate themselves and hate America. I would love to talk a little bit about how just introducing the idea that parents can leave. Not that they're going to, we know there's not a mass exodus, but just that they can will truly give the power back to the parents when they're meeting with their principals, their teachers, their school boards. So would you like to share a little bit about how this really does affect public schools?
Intuitive that having more school choice should reduce the likelihood that you need to exercise it, because they won't cut off your mic anymore. They're not going to call you a domestic terrorist when you can say, hey, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to take my $10,000 or $20,000 somewhere else. Yeah. They'll have an incentive to say, I'm going to do a better job. I'm going to treat you as a customer, as a partner, not the enemy. I'm not going to treat you as a nuisance. I'm not going to try to bully and silence you. I'm going to try to work with you so that you stay in my institution. So yeah, that's a huge benefit of school choice, that it gives families more agency and leverage in the conversation. For far too long, the only special interest represented the employees in the system, the adults. But now the kids have a union of their own, their parents, and it's glorious.
Corey, you said a word, leverage. You know, leverage is so important in anything that we do. I mean, as a baseball player, when I went into a contract negotiation, if I had a good season, guess what? I had the leverage. If I had a bad season, guess what? The team has the leverage. And what I'm hoping this school choice initiative and parent empowerment initiative will do is it'll give everybody leverage to make their communities better. And it's not just school choice, but you know, whether it's policing, whether it's clean streets. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about our inner cities is that I went to every single major city in the United States for 14 straight years and multiple times. And what's happened to Oakland, what's happened to my home city in Baltimore, what's happened to San Francisco, Seattle. These were beautiful places at some point. And when the citizens lose leverage for their elected officials to actually listen to them, then they've got nothing. They've got no way to fight back. And hopefully this will tip the scales now for us to have a lot of great policy wins. And, you know, I think Texas is going to end up being better for it in a lot of different facets, not just education.
You mentioned tipping of the scales, and the school districts have been putting their thumbs on the scales for far too long as well by illegally electioneering. Thank goodness for Ken Paxton for suing 6 or 7 school districts already for illegally influencing elections. I'm also on the board of Liberty Justice Center. We got signed affidavits triggering mandatory criminal investigations for some districts for illegally influencing elections. In some cases, telling their employees, you got to vote for the Sweet 16 if you want to get a raise next year. You can't do that. That is illegal. It's an open secret for decades. People know that they've been doing it. They've thought that they were untouchable. They've been able to do this and flaunt the law for so long. It's not happening anymore. And guess what? Just yesterday, the Senate had a hearing in the morning to discuss maybe having some harsher punishments for illegally putting your thumbs on the scales and how to enforce that as well. So we can hit them at the flanks as well. And this is another reason why school choice is coming to Texas. So
Thank you. I think we're ready to open it up to questions. I would love to hear from the audience. What questions would y'all like to ask our celebrity panel here? Do we have mics? Great.
Hey, my question's for Mark. I'm from Minnesota, huge Twins fan, so that 09 sweep was tough for us, and just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry you finished second in MVP voting to Minnesota's own Joe Mauer that season.
Where's the question?
Okay, I have a real question. So,
how do you feel about that?
my question is actually about the role that athletes and celebrities can play in movements like this. It strikes me that many of America's great athletes are among the most disciplined, hardworking, principled people in our country, and yet it's rare that we see somebody like you stepping up and standing for your principles. We saw the Chiefs kicker just get a lot of backlash for what he was just up to recently, and so how do we kind of flip that so it's not just the far left-wing views that are propped up from the athletic community?
That is such a great question. We could do an entire panel on that. Maybe we should, because by the way, that kicker Harrison Butker went to Georgia Tech. I'm a Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket, and so I'm extremely proud of Harrison. And it really goes back to values, and it goes back to needing God and trusting in God more than yourself. One thing that I saw during my career, and I was guilty of it at times, when you are super successful as an athlete, you think it's because of you. And you get this heightened sense of self-importance. And you think that, all right, well, now I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to go do this. And people start believing in the world. They start becoming, more worldly. They start worrying about status and money and power. And status and money and power is exactly what the left thrives on. They absolutely thrive on it. And so you see athletes that start off in a really good place get sucked into this power vacuum and money vacuum and look at me and Hollywood. And they stop losing the values that made them great. Kids that just grew up loving their teammates and loving playing a sport. And I wish there were more players like Harrison Butker that said, guys, it's the opposite. It's not about you. It's not about, the glitz and glam of Hollywood or the fame of being a pro athlete. It's about, God, family, country, schools, teachers, important things in life. And hopefully Harrison and other people that are out there now that are speaking up and supporting Harrison will start a movement in the opposite direction.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you for the panel. I do have I think we all here realize that through competition, we can improve all schools in a system. How do you respond to the argument that there's an unfair competition because government-run schools have more regulations to adhere to than other schools?
Well, go ahead and deregulate the public schools then. I won't be mad about it. I mean, look, and there were proposals to do that in the legislature last year, right, when it came to the STAR testing. So that's just an excuse, right? Even if you made it exactly the same level playing field, they would still fight tooth and nail against school choice. They do this everywhere. This is not just in Texas. It's an excuse. They have all their talking points to try to prevent change. They want to keep their monopoly on money, but more importantly, they want to keep the monopoly on the minds of other people's kids. We saw this with the bill last year. They had $7 billion in goodies for the public schools. There was $500 million set aside for school choice. They still want to take it because they wanted to trap your kids in their schools. And so, look, don't go the other way, though. Don't regulate the private schools to be, that doesn't make, they're no longer private in that sense. So, look, you don't want the government regulation to follow into the private sector. In places like Arizona, it's very light touch. It's just audits to make sure you're spending the money not on drugs and stuff. I mean, that's very reasonable to me. So look, but at the same time, again, as I mentioned earlier, parents are choosing based on more than test scores. They're choosing based on values. And you can't measure that kind of stuff, right? A bureaucrat can't measure that kind of stuff. So Don't fall for their rhetoric. It's a bunch of BS as an excuse to maintain their monopoly.
And this may not be an apples to apples comparison, but look at what happened to the U.S. Postal Service, right? I mean, when I was a kid, that's how you got your mail. That's how you got packages. Now, I'm not sure if I get anything through the U.S. Postal Service anymore because of options. And hopefully, because of more options, and if every state had school choice options and parents were empowered to choose where they send their kids to school, the free market would fix itself. That might take decades, but it has happened. It really has.
I mean, imagine if you were assigned to your nearest grocery store just based on where you live and it happened to be run by the government and they had empty shelves like socialist countries do today and have historically, or if they were serving you rotten food, you were getting food poisoning every day, and the only recourse you had was to pick up and move houses. That would make zero sense, but they would have a ton of monopoly power. And guess what they'd say? Well, we don't have the food, it's poison, basically, because we don't have enough money. And you keep throwing more money at the problem, it never will solve it. So thus, you've just realized how our government school system is set up today. It's a huge problem.
Absolutely, that's a great question. And I will also add that I'll point back again the fact we had to mandate the teaching of phonics. And yes, there are regulations and things that come down. Oftentimes it's some far left. It says like, this one thing happened, let's create a law for it. And that you can't legislate good citizenry. You can't legislate good parenting. You can't even legislate good teaching. The fact that school leaders across our great state saw 50 years worth of studies that say phonics is how children need to learn to read, and they still did not do it. They still are not doing it, it's law. So it's just excuses. There's one after the other. That's why I'm going to guarantee you when they go, oh, mom and dad are going to remove their child and put them in a school that teaches phonics, we're going to do this. We're going to do this right now. And that is why the incentive is there, why introducing choice will benefit every child. And
the running joke in Iowa was that all the Democrats should have voted for the pared down version of school choice pushed by Governor Reynolds in 2022. It was only a few thousand kids. They blocked it. Guess what? They got a new House. We've seen this movie before. It's happening right now in Texas. And they passed full-throated universal school choice, play stupid games, again, win stupid prizes on the Democrat side. And now, yep. Abbott has been telling local media as well that, they had a good deal on the table last year. They should have voted for that one. I don't know if the same deal is going to be on the table this coming session in 2025. So it's funny. We were calling this all along that we've seen this movie before. Look at what happened in Iowa. Look at what happened in Tennessee in their House in 2022. 10 of the Republicans that were running for the House were endorsed or funded by the teachers union. 9 of them lost. Fantastic. Political kiss of death, the teachers union.
What about the strings? The strings. We keep hearing that, and the frustrating thing, Corey, is we keep hearing that from homeschool people that already have their kids out.
That's a couple of people. I'm not convinced that they aren't funded by the teachers unions.
So, but can you? Aren't there 3 Supreme Court SCOTUS cases that say why the money goes to the kid, not the institution?
Yeah, I mean, we have 2002 Zellman versus Simmons-Harris, 2020 Espinoza v. Montana, 2022 Carson v. Macon out of Maine. We have tons of precedent on this, that school choice is not a violation of the separation of church and state, which isn't in the Constitution. Believe it or not, it's talking about an establishment of state religion. School choice doesn't establish a state religion, but I want to get to your actual question, which is, you hear this argument, when government shekels comes government shackles. Well, guess what? You can get the shackles without the shekels. They've regulated private and home education in some areas. In Oregon in 1922, they outlawed private education altogether. Thankfully, in the Supreme Court case in 25, the court famously ruled that the child is not the mere creature of the state. And some people would be wise to listen to those words today. I'm looking at you, Joe Biden, who says that there's no such thing as other people's kids. They're society's kids. I mean, it's total communist gobbledygook. And look, if you're on Randy Weingarten's side and Biden's side and O'Rourke's side and not Abbott's side, my side, Trump side and parent side, you're probably on the wrong side of the issue. And guess what? No one has ever been forced to take the money. I'd be against it if you were forced to take the money. You can make that cost-benefit decision for your own family and decide for yourselves. But you shouldn't tell other parents that they can't make that choice. States like New York, they have the worst homeschooling law in the book. If you look at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association's map online, well, guess what? They don't have any private school choice. In fact, if you look at the states that have more school choice, they tend to have more education freedom too. Look at Ohio last year. They went all in. They passed universal school choice. At the same time, what did they do? They deregulated homeschooling. So you can do both things at once. You can advance education freedom. And guess what? Politics, as you all know in this room, a lot of you know, a lot of winners in this room. It's good to see you guys. But politics is all about organized interest pushing for what they want. The unions do it all the time, the teachers' unions. But now the parents have their own union representing their kids. Politics is all about organized interest. And with school choice, you bring more people into the coalition, benefiting from private and home education, and eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. You're more likely to win this war from authoritarians trying to take our rights away if you have people on your side fighting back. This is what happened in Arizona. If you didn't remember from Arizona, they passed universal in 2022. Their government website broke down because so many families wanted school choice. The unions tried to put it on the ballot to try to get another bite at the apple to try to get rid of school choice. They already had families benefiting. We saw this in Texas, in Florida as well, that I talked about with the DeSantis election. But in Arizona, since they had so many families already benefiting, they were able to show up at the signature gathering locations and fight back against the unions trying to take away their right to direct their children's upbringing. So don't overthink it. Don't make perfect the enemy of the good. This is a step in the right direction. Take the W or you'll be stuck with the L, because kids are already learning that big government's the answer to all their problems in government-run institutions. They're going to vote to take away your right to homeschool in the future if you don't do something now.
That's exactly correct. And something, if we get real granular, I'm a big fan of defining words. And, you know, the left likes to take words and skew their meaning, right? You go, what is a woman? Well, a woman is this or whatever. They want to change the meaning.
I'm a doctor, but I'm not a biologist.
Right. They want to, you know, it's maddening. But here's the thing. When you say strings attached and you say, what does that mean? Because that's just, it's a platitude. It's something that some people, and if you're like me and probably most people in this room and watching, you have a very healthy distrust of government, as every red-blooded American should. Look, we fought wars to get away from people. We want to be free. That's what we're here talking about. So when people say that to me, I say, what strings? Please be very specific and define what strings. Well, what does that mean to you? Here in Texas, there are no strings attached. First and foremost, if any parent wants to exercise choice and wants to participate in an education savings account, they choose to go and opt in. They choose to make that decision. First and foremost, no one's just going and saying, here's your account that's held in the comptroller's office that you can direct money to wherever you want to educate your child. That's not what's happening. You choose to do this. For those particularly in the homeschool community who, by the way, 70% say, yes, please sign me up. It's expensive to homeschool. I want my kid to have access to this or that. But for those that don't, that's okay. You keep doing you and we'll keep fighting for your freedom too. When we talk about strings, let's be very clear. And I'm saying this right here because y'all are the new body. Y'all are the incoming body. And I know you are pounded nonstop. It's like 10 people that just say the same things over and over again. And you're like, oh my goodness.
The Texas Homeschool
Define strings. And that is the reality. In Texas, the bill is excellent. It is well thought out. It has strong accountability for parents who choose to opt in. It has strong accountability for taxpayers. Y'all, we spent $92.4 billion last year on our public education system. We will approach $100 billion very soon. Let me break that down a little bit further. That is $16,792 per child in the state of Texas. And half of them, over 2.5 million of them, cannot read on grade level. If you are a parent and you have had enough of the indoctrination, if you have had enough of the low quality, if you have had enough of the disrespect, if you have had enough, you want to see your child be successful and you want to see the next generation be successful, education savings accounts, education freedom. That is the way that we empower parents. That is the way that we save Texas. And as goes Texas, so goes America. That is the way we save America.
Just as an aside, I don't know if you've heard some of these arguments as well, where I've heard some of these people say that school choice is an elaborate plot by the Democrats to inject CRT into private school. Has anybody heard that? I mean, if the Democrats are behind it, why do they all vote against it? I mean, come on, it's totally, it's tinfoil hat stuff. I mean, it is insane. And look, you gotta know when to win. We're finally winning. Let's do it. Take the W or else you'll be stuck with the L. So thanks.
More questions?
Brandon Steinhauser, homeschool dad of 5. I want that ESA. I want 5 of them. In all seriousness, that's a great question that the representative asked, but I can tell you just the data supports that homeschool families want to be included. We're in a huge homeschool network. Co-ops exist. And when you talk to parents about this, and we do all the time, they want it. As they learn about it, they like it more and more. And when they find out, oh, we could get carved out of it, they're upset. So I would encourage legislators to, include homeschool families. But here's my question, and it's related to that, which is, should we accept anything less than universal ESAs?
No, we didn't, and we're not. We say that because this, again, is rooted in the principle that made America great, and that is freedom. That is freedom for every single parent, every individual to make the choice of where to live, where to work, where to worship, where to shop, whatever is best for you and your family. So absolutely not. Every single parent, every homeschool parent, every single parent that wants to exercise choice, that needs another option, whether it's because of low performance, whether it's because their child's being bullied to the point of trying to harm themselves, whether it is their IEPs not being listened to, I don't care. I don't care what it is. They should be empowered. Yep. Parents know and love their children most. They have the most interest in making sure they're successful. So every single parent, every single child, that is what we are going for, universal eligibility, and that's what we're getting in the 89th legislative session. One more question. Let's give it to Mark. Are you asking to, go ahead, ask a question.
So the question's actually from her. Sorry. I am a public school teacher. I'm a private, or not private. I teach low incidence disabilities, so students with, a very small percentage of students actually qualify to be in my room. I teach foundational learning. Yeah. So my question goes to kids with special needs. Yeah. A lot of times we are the forgotten when it comes to being properly accommodated for. I've taught both here and in Wyoming. Wyoming is a choice state. I've had students leave private schools and have to go to public schools because those private schools couldn't properly accommodate for those kids. And so that would be my question, would be, how do we make sure that those kids get properly accommodated for?
Are the government schools properly accommodating all special needs? Because my mom's nodding her head behind you because she works with students with special needs as well. And it's a lot of elaborate box checking. They'll say, oh, well, we've met all of your needs, we have this, we've done this, but the kids are still wanting to go to private schools. Why is that? Well, it's because they're not getting their needs met in some of the government-run institutions. We even have, I've heard the argument that you give away your IDEA rights. That is just a form of box checking and regulation. It's not actually families and schools meeting their needs. We actually have, in some cases, nationwide, a version of school choice through IDEA where public school parents, if the school is not meeting their disability and their needs, then they can go make the argument that the district's not meeting the needs to compel them to pay for private school tuition and fees. The district always says, nah, we're meeting your needs. We did this, this, and this. Trust us. Don't trust the parents. And in some cases, that has to go before a judge. And who are the parents that are in best position to go before a judge, hire a lawyer, make the case in order to go to a private school? What we're saying with education freedom and passing the bill, you shouldn't have to go fight before a judge for the right to direct the upbringing of your child. So I would say, look, the parents are in the best position to make that decision. And so they should be able to get the money to follow the child to a private school too. And look, not all private schools are going to be the best option, but look, we can't say that all public schools are the best option either. So it's going to depend on the individual family.
You know, I think it speaks a lot of you, the fact that parents are choosing, really, thank you for your service. I'm actually a public charter school parent, and so this isn't a battle between public and private or homeschool. This is about recognizing parents, but great teachers. You know, Corey pointed out that we've increased public education spending by 166%, and only about somewhere between 10 and 15% of that has made its way into the teachers. I'm going to give you another bit of information that I am looking at y'all's fix. But back in HB3, I love that bill because it's kind of horrifying, but something else that was in there, this was celebrated as an amazing bill. It was like $7 billion public education. Yay, we did this, this is great. But there's a little sneaky trick in there. Probably some lobbyists did this. Probably some lobbyists that may have been in the legislature at the time and now are lobbyists, but I digress on that. But here's what they did. They said funding for special needs and career and technical education. To be clear, with career and technical education, CTE, we spend $3 billion across the state of Texas. As a point of reference, the Perkins grant that does this across the entire country spends $1 billion. Okay, so we spend a lot of money. But some people got in there and started doing their thing and making their negotiations and hearing from their lobbyists and all of that. And what did they do? Well, they made funding that only 55% of the allocated funding for special needs and for CTE actually had to be used for those purposes. 45% of that does not have to be used for the kids that you are serving. The parent empowerment movement is a movement for great educators. It is a movement for great leaders within the education system who says, we have run off the rails, both financially and academically. We need to put the hands back in the hands of the parents, because it sounds like parents are already choosing you. And that is a phenomenal thing. Thank you for your service. And that's what we're trying to give the opportunity for every single parent to have the same choices that those that are coming to you would do.
Yes, and I'll add, and thank you, to all the teachers out there that are listening, thank you for everything that you do. But I'm not a policy wonk. It took me 24 years to graduate from college. That being said, I graduated at 42 years old. So, but I do have some common sense, I think. And common sense would tell me if more students that had special needs had ESAs that they could go spend on schools that could serve them, more schools would pop up.
Yeah, that too.
That's just common sense to me.
They will come.
And again, I go back to one of the earlier questions. Once we start this in Texas, the free market will answer some of our issues. And I'm hoping that this is one of those issues that the free market will solve.
And it's not all abstract and theoretical either. This happened in Florida.
Yeah.
I wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal in an article rebutting the rural myth called "The Little Red Schoolhouse Could Do with a Little Competition." But what the data that I cited from Florida showed that over the past decade, as they've expanded school choice in the most rural areas, the number of private education providers has doubled. So it's correct that when you put the money in the hands of the families and the demand is there, supply, market entry will happen, especially when you have education savings accounts. You don't even have to build a new brick and mortar school. You can use it for homeschool co-ops and micro schools as well, which have become so popular in Arizona that the NEA, the largest teachers union in the country, put an opposition research sheet out on Kelly Smith, the founder of Prenda Micro Schools, because so many families wanted that, especially when the government schools were closed. They were seeking out these pandemic pods, they were calling them at the time, basically a way to economize on the process of homeschooling. The Wall Street Journal got a whiff of this opposition research sheet. Someone sent it to them. I won't tell you who sent it to them. But the headline the next day was, "The teachers union's tiny little enemy." It had a big elephant afraid of a little tiny ant. And it just goes to show you the market is shaking up. And look, the public schools are getting better, but parents are having a more wide variety of options at the same time. It's a win-win solution.
Y'all, this has been amazing. I'm being told that we have to wrap up. I'm going to stick around.
We can cut my book signing short if we want to keep doing more. I'm serious.
I'm going to stick around. Corey's going to be here. Buy his book if you didn't get one. It's great. Mark is going to stick around for a little bit. We're here to answer some questions. Thank you guys for being part of the parent empowerment mission. Thank you for locking arms with Techans, for supporting legislators that are willing to speak truth to power. Keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for being at TPPF, and onward to victory.
Give it up for Mandy.
Great job. That was awesome.
Come on the road with that.